Hello everyone, and welcome to part 5 of this shuttle bus build series, which coincidentally happens to be the final video in this shuttle bus build series, which feels real good to say. As with all of the videos in this series, we have a lot to get into, so let's dive right on in. When we last left you in part 4, most of the major systems in this bus were installed and functioning, save for one very important one, which is our gray water system.
We opted not to install a black tank in this build and instead use a portable cassette toilet. In our last rig, we did have a black tank, and it's a little bit cumbersome. They can be hard to clean, and they do take up a lot of space under the bus. So we decided to purchase a 5-gallon portable cassette toilet instead and use all of our available space under the bus for a gray tank.
We opted to go with a 30-gallon gray water tank, and when it came time to finding a position to mount the tank underneath the bus, we originally wanted it sort of up towards the front of the bus, situated underneath our shower and close to all the freshwater plumbing systems that we had already installed. Due to the fact that we kept the bus's original AC system, the AC condenser sort of prohibited us from mounting a tank of that size in that position. So we had to choose a spot underneath the bus that had the most real estate for a tank of this size, which happens to be the very back of the bus. In terms of actually mounting the tank itself, I decided to go with a combination of threaded steel rod and 1-inch steel tubing. I took the steel tubing and welded it into this sort of eye-shaped brace that would support the bottom of the tank. I then drilled holes into all 4 corners of the eye brace, and then drilled 4 corresponding holes into the frame of the bus through about, 5/16 inch thick steel with a hand drill, which any of you metal fabricators out there will know that it took me a long time and a lot of arm strength to drill upward through that thick amount of steel, but I got there. Once I had the holes lined up, I fed the threaded rod through the brace and the holes in the frame of the bus, used a bunch of lock nuts and lock washers to tighten everything down and raise that tank so that it's sitting flush to the bottom of the frame, and it felt really solid. Doesn't feel like that thing's going anywhere, which is very important because when you're mounting any sort of tank or anything underneath your bus at all that has a lot of weight, which this thing will weigh probably about 300 pounds when it's full, you really got to make sure when you're mounting it, it is very sturdy and that it's not going to break when it's full.
Once the gray water tank was in, I was able to run the gray water lines to our sink and shower. This process is not super difficult. It's just a matter of drilling holes in the subfloor and then connecting up a mess of PVC pipes from the sink and shower and then running them all the way back to the tank at the back of the bus. The only challenge that really presented itself during this process was being careful with our gradient of the lines themselves. Obviously, if the tank is positioned higher than the water lines, water is not going to flow uphill and into the tank. So we had to be very careful to ensure that the lines were graded down appropriately into the tank so that water can flow in the correct direction and prevent any blockages or backups from happening. It did take some time and some finessing due to the tight quarters you work in when you're underneath a vehicle, but at the end of the day, we did get there and our drains are working great.
It was around this time that I got to work building all of the cabinet doors and drawer faces in the bus. We decided to go with a shaker style door for all of the cabinets in the bus. They're relatively easy to build, they're very lightweight, and they just have a really nice classic look to them. I started these doors by cutting the stiles and rails of each door, which are just made of 1x2s. I then took these stiles and rails over to the router table and routed out a channel on each inner edge of each stile and rail. I then cut a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, which would serve as the center panel for each door. Then before inserting the panel into the channels of the stiles and rails, I decided to put in what are called space balls, which is not just a funny movie from the 80s. These are little rubber balls about 1/4 inch in diameter that go into the channels of each stile and rail, and they sort of act to center the panel and prevent any warpage or cracking that would occur if the panel decided to expand or contract over time due to moisture or different temperature changes. It's just a good little fail-safe to have in there to keep your doors from cracking over time. Then to join all of these stiles and rails together, I used expertly crafted mortise and tenon joints because I am a very, very skilled woodworker. Just kidding, I used pocket holes to join all of these stiles and rails together, along with many, many, many things inside this bus. Pocket holes were a great option for these doors because we had so many of them. It's a very simple way to join these all together, and we're comfortable with using them. We've been doing it since day one of this bus build, I'm pretty sure. So they just worked as a very easy, simple solution to bust all of these doors out.
While Greg was working on all of his many doors and drawer faces, I also had a couple of door projects of my own to work on. So I built the biggest door in the bus, which is our barn door that also serves as our partition door separating the cab from the coach. In our last rig, we had a giant secure metal partition that served as a divider between these two areas, and we loved it. It kept things really secure in the back. We felt safe when we were boondocking and, parking lots and things like that. So when we bought this bus and noticed that it had the beginnings, or maybe the disassembled parts of a metal partition still included, we decided we were going to keep what was there and expand upon it so we could still have this feature. It took us a while to settle on the barn door as the solution for the space, but it has a really great look that works with the rest of the build, and it's super functional to boot. The process of actually putting the door together was surprisingly simple despite how nice it looks as a finished product. So I took some oak 1x3s that I picked up from Home Depot. I stained them a medium brown, and I brad nailed them all together in sort of this iconic barn door shape. The rolling hardware I picked up from Amazon. It was pretty inexpensive, and it was just a matter of attaching it and then drilling it into the framing that we had previously installed. And really quickly, this went from sort of a clunky opening between the two sections of the bus into this really beautiful finished piece that has become kind of a highlight of the build for me. The other thing we did do for this door, because it is on swinging movable hardware, is add a bunch of different latches to hold it in open and closed positions for both a little extra security and to keep it from moving while we're driving. And so far, it's all been holding up great. The other style of door I built was a tambour door. So in the bed area, I was hesitant to close off access to all of the windows that we had in that space, and we did end up having to cover most of them. So I wanted something that would provide more privacy and more security than just a regular curtain, but I still wanted something that could be set up and taken down fairly easily so we could enjoy some natural light in the bed area. And what we came up with is a tambour style door. So this is the kind of thing you see on like a roll top desk. So it's super flexible, but it still gives you a complete privacy when the door is rolled all the way up and total access to the windows when it's all the way down. This seems like it might have been a sort of complicated project, but the reality was it was pretty simple to put together once we had come up with the idea. I took a large piece of canvas in the size that I wanted the door to be, and then I ripped strips of 1/4-inch plywood to serve as the slats. We ripped ours at about a 2-inch width to match the beadboard that we had in the bed area. Then I glued them with construction adhesive onto the canvas and then stained them the color of our choice, which was sort of a dark brown. To install them over the windows themselves, I purchased some tambour track, which is something I was able to find online. Originally, I was going to route channels for the door to slide in, but the plastic track gave it a little bit less friction to work with and just simplified the install for us overall. In its final position, when the door is rolled all the way up, it completely covers the window and blocks all the light that could be able to get out in that area. And then when you roll it down, it slides down behind the head of the bed to give you a pretty good amount of access to the two windows that we were able to leave open. I also did add some little hooks at the top to keep the door held up when we're driving so that it doesn't bounce around. And that was the extent of the installation. It was really not that complicated of a project, and it was a really interesting and I thought, different way to kind of give us the best of both worlds. Not quite a curtain, not quite a wall, but still super secure and functional.
Once we had all of the doors made and ready to be installed, it was around this time that we started deciding about paint choices for the interior of the bus. It can be daunting to choose a color scheme for your bus. Unlike a house, where there are many different rooms that all can have kind of their own look to them, this is all one cohesive space, and all of the space has to match itself. We had a color scheme in mind at the beginning of this build, and we didn't want to go way too crazy with too many bold, intense colors, but we also didn't want to just go the classic white and wood. While that feels open, it also can get a little bit sterile, and we wanted to kind of find that nice middle ground between color and white. With all of this in mind, we decided to paint the majority of our lower cabinets this sort of bright teal color, and then for every other cabinet in the space, we decided to go with a sort of cream off-white color. This combination allowed us to have the openness that the white provides while still having some of those bold colors that we had in mind from the beginning.
Getting the painting finished was super important because it allowed us to then install some components that we had been trying to protect while we put the paint on. So one of the first things we did after painting was install our countertops. We went with a butcher block countertop. It's made of birch, and we just picked it up from Home Depot. We got an 8-foot slab because we had multiple places in the build that we wanted to use it. So obviously the most important place for the countertop to be is in the kitchen. So we had to cut an opening for our oven to fit in, as well as an opening for our sink to drop down into. We also included countertop on our sort of end counter piece that sits at the end of the couch. And then on the back of the couch, I also used some of the remnant pieces to create this sort of long backing strip that finishes the top of the couch. This is really great for setting your coffee cup down in the morning or any other beverages you may choose to indulge in, and it creates this really cohesive and finished look in sort of the lower level living space. I also used one of the other remaining pieces of countertop to create this little inset piece for our sink. Our sink has these little ridges that allows a piece of anything you'd like to sit on top of it, and including a piece of countertop in this space allows for this really nice seamless look across our entire kitchen. Every piece of countertop in the build is sealed with a urethane high gloss sealant by Waterlocks. We wanted something that wouldn't darken the wood too much and keep it nice and bright, but I also wanted a super high gloss finish to match some of the other furniture we were working on, and the result is really, really stunning and works awesome in this space. While we were installing our countertops, this also gave us a chance to start finishing up our kitchen sink area. So we went with a very large stainless steel sink. The sink we had in our old rig was much too small for what we needed it for, and it was always kind of a struggle to have enough space for dishes. This time around, we will not have that problem. Behind the sink, we have 2 faucets. One is our main kitchen faucet, which just runs straight out of the water tank. This has both hot and cold water, which is a nice feature, and it is also touch activated, which was just a fun little thing that we thought we would splurge on. Next to the larger faucet is a much smaller faucet, which is attached to our water filtration system. This is a 3-stage filter that allows us to safely drink any of the water that we carry in our water tanks. For us, this is a really huge upgrade because we did not have a drinking water system in our last rig, and we used water jugs to transport most of our drinking water around. So to be able to just turn the tap on and pour yourself a glass of water is huge.
As mentioned in previous videos, we dedicated a portion of space at the back of the bus that would serve sort of as a garage storage area. And we sort of went back and forth on what the best way to utilize this space that we sacrificed in the living quarters would be. We are musicians by trade, and we travel around with a lot of really bulky musical equipment. And so we decided that sort of big open shelving that ran floor to ceiling would be the best use of the space. Because we have such, large, oddly shaped items, you could store music gear back there, you could store camping gear back there, and we didn't really want to section the space to fit any specific individual sized item. That being said, we have a ton of space back there with these floor to ceiling shelves, and they are very, very sturdy. They are drilled into the ribbing of the back end of the bus. It's just a really, really good use of a little bit of extra space that we had in this build.
We also got around to finishing our shower. A full-size, super functional shower was an absolute must for us in this build. So originally we were going to have it in line with the kitchen countertops to create everything at the same depth on that side of the bus. However, when we mapped that out on the floor and stood in that space, it was definitely too small to be comfortable. So our solution was to kick the back half of the shower out at sort of this angle to create sort of a neo-angle look so that we have some additional space, but it still fits pretty comfortably within the constraints of the corner that we were working in. Inside the shower itself, we started with plywood walls, as almost everything in this bus is made of plywood. We coated these walls with the rest of our Red Guard, which you may remember is underneath our mattress for some waterproofing there. It's also in the shower to protect that plywood from any moisture that may get through the other layers of material. On the shower floor, we have a Curdy shower pan and curb. These are made out of a closed cell foam, which allows us to do something that's super lightweight and also super modular. We had this unusual angle in the floor, so you couldn't really find any prefabricated pans that would fit that space, so we were able to just simply cut this with a utility knife to fit everything into place on this unusual angle that we had. Over the top of the shower pan, we did regular ceramic hexagon tiles set with a thin set mortar. This was a project. I underestimated the difficulty that laying tile would present to me. The first time around, I used the incorrect mortar and had to throw away all the tiles and start over. The second time around, I didn't use enough mortar and had to scrape all the tiles back out, but this time they could be saved. And the third time around, they finally stuck. So what was supposed to be a weekend project turned into like a 15-day project of doing and redoing. But we got there, and there is tile now securely at the bottom of this shower pan. It does provide a really stable base and a super waterproof surface for the whole shower to kind of sit on. On top of the tile, we decided to add a teak mat. This is just a really nice aesthetic inclusion. It matches a lot of the other dark wood in the bus, and it does keep you up off the cold tile and allow the water to sort of drain underneath you so you don't have to stand in standing water while you're in the shower. For our shower walls, we decided to go with a product called Wall. This stuff is awesome. It is a vinyl tile that can be cut with a jigsaw or even an X-Acto knife. You put them up with construction adhesive. They are tongue and groove, so they kind of all snap together. It's a really, really slick system that they have designed. I've seen them in a few builds, but I would recommend them to anybody who is trying to put tile in their build. They're light, they're durable, they are excellent. And the finished product too just looks so polished. It's better than anything I could have done with regular ceramic tiles. So highly recommended if you're looking for that tiled look in your build.
And we are not sponsored by Wall, but if they do want to come on as a sponsor, if you're watching this and you know someone from Wall, you send them our way.
To finish off the shower stall, we of course had to add a door. So to do this, we started with ripping some 2x4s at sort of a specific angle so that they could be oriented in a way that would give us a seamless finish and allow the door to open straight across. Then we took those wood components as well as some wood to cover the Curdy curb, and we painted them all with a topside marine paint. This gives you a super durable and waterproof barrier to your wood, which keeps it from being damaged by water, and also gives it this really nice high gloss finish, which we really liked. On top of that framing, we installed our shower door. We went with a Nautilus retractable RV shower door, and we love this thing. It is a super cool design where it rolls up into its own housing when it's not in use, but can extend to pretty much any length you want when it's open. It is self-cleaning, so it cleans itself every time you close it. It's got a really lightweight overall construction, so it doesn't add a lot of unnecessary weight, and it creates this really awesome finished, almost wall-like look when it's closed over the shower stall, which just creates this super finished, super satisfying appearance for that whole section of the bus, which was amazing to see for the very first time when we installed it.
I saw the light go down. melted cigarette, a broken fall. The rain's gonna be here really soon.
One of the last major projects we tackled in this build was installing our floor. We decided to go with a luxury vinyl plank flooring from SmartCore. This stuff is really nice. It's very light, it's very durable, it's waterproof. It makes this a really good choice for any kind of build because, you know, you're out camping, you have a dog who tracks things into the bus. It's really easy to clean and sweep up. If you drop something on it, it really does hold up to all the wear and tear of being on the road. The installation of the Duma wall in our shower sort of prepared us for a really easy installation of this floor because it's a very similar thing. It's made of vinyl. You can cut it with a jigsaw to any weird curve or angle that you need to install it. It snaps together. There's no adhesives. There's no nailing down of anything. It's all compression held together, and we got this thing in within a day, which is probably our fastest major project to date, which I guess we saved the best for last in that regard. So we're very happy with the way this turned out. Before we actually laid down the planks, we installed a quiet warmth radiant heat mat, which allows us to have heated floors, which is super bougie. Really is a nice addition because on a cold day, especially like today while we're filming, it's about 28 degrees outside and these floors feel like it's the middle of summer right now. So we're very happy that we found the space in our budget to include it in this build.
Once the floors went in, pretty much everything left to do was really just finishing touches, which is a really exciting point to be at in the build. So I recently got to install what became my absolute favorite project during this entire bus build, and that was the epoxy river table that I built. This was something I had in mind from the very beginning stages of planning for this build, and I am so happy that not only was I able to make it happen, I feel like I executed it on a high enough level to be pretty proud of the piece that I put out. So at the beginning of the build, we were gifted a very large live edge slab of wood from unknown origin. We don't know what kind of wood it is. But we took a 22-inch section out of that, and the first thing I did was planed it down to the appropriate thickness. I started with about 1.5 inches thick. I actually had to build a small planing jig in order to do this because we didn't have anything but a plunge router to do this job with. So I put together some plywood scraps and made this sort of long flat sled so I could move the router back and forth and get that wood down to a more workable thickness. From there, I sanded it up to a very, very high grit to get a really nice surface on the wood, and then I split it in half and then flipped the wood over so the cut edges were on the outside, which creates this sort of river shape down the middle of the two pieces of wood. From there, I built a mold out of melamine to put the wood inside, and inside this mold I put a seal coat of epoxy on the wood, so that way the wood not only was protected from air getting in or out during the rest of the process, but it also actually held the wood into the mold so that during the pouring of the next layer of epoxy, no warping or cracking or shifting of that wood would occur. The next part of this project was probably the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. It was pouring the deep pour epoxy in between the two small slabs of wood that I had created. We tinted ours with a metallic blue-green mica powder to create this sort of shimmery teal effect in our river. And then we dumped the entire 1.5 gallons in pretty much all at once. And the effect of seeing that go from empty wood to this cool sort of, you know, moving rivery shape is just really, really fantastic to watch, and it was really cool to be able to actually do that for ourselves in this project. The deep pour epoxy has to cure for about 4 days. I left ours for 7 to be on the super safe side. From there, you have to demold it and then cut all the edges back to square and then plane it down to the final thickness that you want to use. I went with a 3/4 inch thick table because it's a fairly heavy table overall, and I didn't want to overload the mount we were planning on putting it on. From there, it's just back for another really high grit sanding and then a final seal coat of epoxy on the top to really give it that high gloss shine and a really nice polished finished look to the piece. Once the table was done, we mounted it on a lagoon mount. This is something that I know is pretty popular in a lot of builds, especially sprinters. You see them all the time. But so far for us, it has totally lived up to the hype. It has been super functional, very easy to move it out of the way when you're on the couch, and also very easy to take down. It usually lives right in the space where we're sitting right now, but as you can see, it's not here because it's not a problem to move it out of the way when you don't need it. So a super awesome and functional addition to what turned out to be a really beautiful piece. One of the biggest things left to do was to make our couch cushions. We have 7 total couch cushions on this couch. They are made of 4-inch high-density foam, and they all are fairly similarly sized to allow for the couch to transform into its many modes and then have cushions to accommodate each of those configurations. To make the cushions, I used the Sailrite 30-minute box cushion tutorial. I found it to be super informative and really simple to follow along to, and I made all 7 of these cushions without issue while following those instructions that they laid out there. I would definitely recommend that if you have a lot of cushions to make.
And best of all, having these cushions keeps us from sitting on plywood while filming these videos, which is always a super big plus.
After the cushions were done, there were literally only a couple of things left to do. I built the mountain shelf that hangs on our back wall. It's made out of the same oak that the barn door is made out of and stained to match to create sort of a bookend appearance to the interior of the bus. It kind of breaks up the big empty white space that is our back wall really nicely with a more interesting shape than just a, hanging picture or something like that. Finally, I made our curtains, which hang over all of our open windows. They are double layered with blackout fabric on the exterior layer, and I also embedded magnets into both sides of each panel so that they would stick both to the metal frame of the windows as well as to each other to create a really good light seal to prevent any light from getting out when we're maybe stealth camping, and to help keep the heat in when it's cold and the heat out when it's hot.
It's the fire in the rain. It's the smile within the pain. It's the logic but insane. You cannot know from where it came. It's the way you cross the floor.
And there you have it. That brings us to the end of this build series, which is something that I don't think either of us thought we would ever say on some of the days during this build.
We want to thank you all so much for following along on this crazy journey with us. Thank you to anybody who's been watching our videos, all of you who have subscribed. It's been so fun to bounce ideas off of people and share experiences with others who have been doing a similar build. So thank you so much for coming along with us, and we really hope you've enjoyed watching us as much as we enjoy now being in the final build itself. That being said, this is not the last you'll see of us. We are hoping to do a full tour and walkthrough of this build in the very near future. We're also hoping to do a deeper dive into some of the systems that we've created so we can explain a little more in depth some of the things we did. If there's anything in particular that you would like to see from us, please let us know. Put it in the comments. We will add it to our list of things to do. In the next few weeks, we are planning to head west and get this bus out on the road where it belongs. So we look forward to sharing some of that with you and bringing you along for the ride. So thanks again so much for watching, and we will see you soon.